Alright, Sorrim Rule video, part 2. So hello everyone and welcome back to another Sorrim video. As I mentioned in part 1, there are a few additional rules and features to the Sorrim TCG that I wasn't really able to cover in the last video, so I'm going to talk about them here in this video. Now, to start with, we're going to be talking about calculating damage, heals, hexes, raises, wilts, and challenges. So first, we're going to move on to damage calculation. I briefly discussed this in the last video, but it's a very important piece to the game. How damage is calculated can be shown by this. When a sigil is cast, you take your frontline fighter's current might stat and deduct it from your enemy frontline fighter's current health. So for this example, let me show you how this would work with the fighter's Goal and Yule. Goal casts a sigil and it successfully lands, but now you have to calculate damage. Well, from what we know, damage is calculated by taking a fighter's current might stat and subtracting it from the enemy's current health stat. So Goal has 75 might, and Yule has 250 health. If Goal was to successfully cast a sigil against Yule, then Yule would end up taking 75 damage and would end up having 175 health remaining. In regards to damage calculation, that's pretty much it. Now let's move on to what wilts are. So what are wilts now? Wilts act as debuffs in the game, and when they're cast, they lower the stats of the enemy frontline fighter and look a little something like this when they appear on a card. But now this information looks a little bit confusing. What exactly is this all saying? Let's break it down here. The fighter's trickery stat determines its ability to lower the enemy fighter's stats. On a sigil, a player will see scaled values for trickery and the stat that will be lowered. For example, a card could say the following: Trickery 65/90, -5/-10 stat. If a fighter's trickery is 65, they will decrease the enemy's stat shown on the right by 5, but if a fighter's trickery is at 100 or higher, the wilt will decrease the stat shown on the right by 10. Let's use Hailstorm as an example. It specifically shows trickery 65/100, -5/-10 might. So if a fighter has 65 trickery, when they cast Hailstorm, they will decrease an enemy's might stat by 5. However, if they have above 100 trickery, the wilt will decrease the enemy's might stat by 10 instead. And now that we've covered wilts, let's move on to raises. And to simply define a raise, it is the ability to increase your frontline fighter's stats when they are in conflict. The fighter's altruism stat determines its ability to raise its other stats. On a sigil, a player will see scaled values for altruism and the stat that will be raised. For example, a card could say the following: Altruism 65/90 +5/+10 stat. If a fighter's altruism is 65, they'll raise the stat shown on the right by 5. But if a fighter's altruism is at 90 or higher, they'll raise the stat shown on the right by 10. So in this case, let's use Fireworks to break down this example. It specifically has altruism 60/90 +5/+10 altruism. So if a fighter has 60 altruism when they cast Fireworks, they will increase their own altruism stat by 5. However, if they have above 90 altruism, the raise will increase their altruism by 10 instead. For the most part, raises and wilts counter one another and are essentially the opposites of each other's abilities, but they work and are calculated in the same way. Now that we've taken care of that, let's move on to what hexes are and how to calculate them. Hexes act as a form of bonus damage when casting sigils, and how this bonus damage is calculated is by taking the current value of the fighter's trickery stat and subtracting the number specified on the card. This difference is then taken from the receiving fighter's health. So let's say, for example, that Maris is casting a hex on an enemy fighter with the sigil Wretched Waters. This will deal 20 hex damage. We will get this because Maris' trickery stat is 70. The number specified for this hex is 50. The value we end up getting is 20, and this number is what we subtract from our enemy's current health stat. So now we move on to heals. Heals are basically what they sound like. They are sigils that heal the frontline fighter that cast them. How this healing is calculated, though, is by taking that fighter's current altruism stat and subtracting the number specified on the card. The difference is then added to that frontline fighter's health. So with Maris' help once again, let's say that she is casting a heal to replenish her health with the sigil Petalwind. This will heal her for 25 health. We get this because her altruism stat is 75, and the number specified for this heal is 50. The value we end up getting is 25, and then we add this number to our frontline fighter's current health stat. Also, it's important to note two things. In regards to heals and hexes, these don't lower the caster's stats. I know it says a minus number on the card, but you're not deducting your stats to activate these effects. You're simply calculating a value that either you add to your health or subtract from your enemies. And speaking of health interactions, another important thing to note is that a fighter cannot overheal themselves. The fighter's health cannot go higher than the original value printed on the card. But now we move on to the final Sigil feature of this video, and this is the challenge. So what is a challenge? Well, a challenge provides bonuses if certain conditions are met. So in the case of March of the Snowmen, the challenge says if I was to roll a 5, I would be able to increase my frontline fighter's might stat by 10. And that's really it. The challenges vary between different sigil to sigil. Essentially, if you fulfill the condition, you get the effect. And that's really it for the rules section of this video. But before I end it for today, I wanted to quickly discuss one additional thing. With the release of Sorrim Triumphant Origins, it marked Sorrim's first release. I can gladly say that I'm continuing to make new fighters, new sigils, and new updates to the game of Sorrim. And in addition to this, I'm happy to say that I have started work on the next box set for the newest fighters, newest sigils, which will be introducing some new mechanics to the game. However, like all things, this is going to be taking some time. I'm going to be trying to post some videos about these later on down the line, so we hope that you see them then. Anyways, that's all I have time for today, and hope to see you all again soon. Goodbye, everyone.